Hello, and welcome back to Shadow Files, secrets they don't want revealed. Tonight, we travel to the Nevada desert, a place of heat, silence, and unbroken sky. A place whose horizon hides one of the most mysterious military installations in the world, Area 51. Everyone's heard of it, the supposed cradle of UFOs, the center of alien autopsies, a testing ground for reverse-engineered technology. But what if I told you that the real secret of Area 51 isn't above ground at all? What if the true mystery lies beneath it, a ghost city buried under Las Vegas's shadow, built for reasons no one was meant to discover?
This is the Ghost City Beneat Area 51. What lies under Las Vegas?
The legend starts decades before Area 51 became a household name. Back in the 1940s, during the final years of World War II, American engineers and physicists were working under Operation Paperclip, bringing over German scientists, some of whom had worked on advanced rocketry and radar systems. Among their projects were early prototypes for underground command centers, bunkers meant to survive nuclear attacks. Groom Lake, a dried salt flat northwest of Las Vegas, was one of the areas quietly surveyed for its stable bedrock and isolation. By 1955, under the direction of the CIA and the U.S. Air Force, construction began on secret testing facilities for the U-2 reconnaissance plane. On the surface, this was about flight testing. But below the surface, literally, other construction began. Engineers were told they were digging utility tunnels, drainage channels, and storage vaults. Yet, the blueprints showed rooms with no defined function, sealed sections, ventilation shafts that didn't connect anywhere. Some of these subterranean layouts extended far beyond the perimeter fence. In a now declassified 1957 memo titled Subterranean Infrastructure Development at Groom, one section describes habitation chambers for prolonged isolation experiments. Another refers to containment facilities for non-standard biological or electromagnetic assets. The terminology is bureaucratic, but the implications are strange. During those early Cold War years, fear and secrecy fed each other. The US and the Soviet Union raced not just for weapons and space, but for control of knowledge, any knowledge. Reports of unidentified flying objects skyrocketed. Many were misidentified aircraft, but some weren't so easily explained. In 1947, when the Roswell incident occurred, fragments of alleged unknown material were said to be sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but rumors persist that other more mysterious cargo ended up in Nevada. By the 1960s, Area 51 was a fully functional black-budget testing ground. Pilots tested the A-12 Oxcart, the State Route 71, the D-21 drone. But underground, a parallel infrastructure developed. Retired workers later claimed that beneath the dry lake bed were multiple levels, up to 10, descending more than 200 feet underground. These weren't just bomb shelters. They were laboratories, dormitories, hangars, even something resembling a small city. One man, a self-identified electrical technician known publicly only as Hank, described his experience in a 1992 interview that was never officially verified but was consistent with certain structural diagrams leaked in later years. Hank said, "We had elevators that went below what we called level 3, but only supervisors had clearance for deeper. I once looked down the shaft. It kept going, metal rungs and lights. You could hear air moving, machinery maybe. There were rumors those lower levels weren't built by us." Rumors, of course, grow in darkness. Workers joked about the mole people of Groom Lake, subterranean maintenance crews who never surfaced. Some said they saw shadows moving through service corridors after hours, long after human shifts had ended. Others heard distant metallic scraping from below sealed bulkheads. Yet amid the myths, fragments of truth appear. In 1974, a U.S. Geological Survey report about Nevada's underground aquifers noted artificial cavities, at depths inconsistent with known mining or civil projects. Those notes were later removed from the public archive. In the early 1980s, seismic readings taken by nearby researchers showed localized tremors, not earthquakes, but mechanical vibrations consistent with large moving equipment beneath solid rock. Whatever was happening underground wasn't small.
When you think of a ghost city, you might imagine decaying streets, rusted signes, en écho aux fonce-living civilisations.
But the ghost city beneath Area 51, if witnesses are to be believed, was never meant to host civilians. It was designed to host projects, things too secret, too dangerous, or too alien to be kept anywhere near daylight. One former contractor, who claimed to have been part of a tunneling team in 1983, said his crew drilled a connection shaft from Papoose Dry Lake, a smaller basin southwest of Groom, and broke through into an existing cavity that was already reinforced, with polished metal walls and power conduits running deeper underground. The engineers were told to seal the breach immediately and pretend they'd never seen it. He said, "It was like hitting an empty city under the earth. Somebody built there before we did." Such statements are impossible to verify, but they persist, over decades, from multiple independent sources. By 1990, Area 51's notoriety exploded into pop culture, largely due to Bob Lazar's claims of having worked at a nearby facility called S4, studying propulsion systems from extraterrestrial craft. Whether or not his story was true, something curious happened afterward. Activity at Groom Lake increased dramatically. Satellite images revealed new hangars, new roads, and what appeared to be large-scale excavation zones. Piles of debris marked spoil from tunneling. The official line was that these were for new radar installations. But the depth and shape of those excavations suggested something else. In 1995, civilian satellites captured heat signatures in concentric rings beneath the desert floor, a pattern inconsistent with natural geology. Some researchers hypothesized that these were exhaust vents or geothermal conduits. The temperature differential was extreme, nearly 20 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than surrounding ground at night. What could generate that much sustained heat beneath solid rock? Around the same time, residents in Rachel, Nevada, the tiny town nearest to the base, began reporting strange phenomena: tremors without earthquakes, electrical interference, bright flashes from the horizon. Some said their TV sets picked up bursts of static that briefly formed images: corridors, metallic walls, faces behind glass. Of course, skeptics dismissed it as pareidolia. But then, in 1997, a power technician for the Lincoln County Grid anonymously mailed a set of infrared readings to a UFO researcher. Those readings showed periodic spikes in consumption, thousands of megawatts, that lasted only minutes but repeated every few nights. "It's as if something huge switches on beneath the desert," the note read. Was it an experimental reactor? A propulsion test? Or something else entirely? Fast forward to 2004. The U.S. was deeply involved in foreign wars, and funding for black projects was at an all-time high. A batch of leaked documents surfaced briefly on an obscure forum dedicated to declassified military research. They mentioned Project Cicada, supposedly a network of autonomous subsurface installations linked to Area 51 and Nellis Air Force Range. One file referred to subterranean habitation architecture at Groom extending 12 miles southeast. Another referenced civilian displacement protocols for deep-level expansion. Those documents were quickly taken down. The user account vanished. The legend of the Ghost City intensified when, in 2010, workers repairing a communications relay north of Mercury, Nevada, discovered a collapsed vent shaft lined with reinforced composite material, the kind used only in classified military projects. The shaft descended at least 200 feet before disappearing into rubble. Instruments detected a faint electric field emanating from below. When specialists returned days later, the site had been sealed, fenced off, and labeled as government property. Locals began whispering that the ground itself was alive, that something beneath the desert was moving, humming, watching. Ranchers said their cattle refused to cross certain areas. Campers claimed to hear mechanical sounds rising through the sand at night, grinding, rhythmic, like breathing. In 2013, when the CIA finally acknowledged the existence of Area 51 through declassified U2 documents, many assumed the mystery was over. But for some investigators, it was only the beginning. Because alongside the familiar aircraft photos were construction diagrams labeled Deep Storage Level B and Personnel Containment, Section E. These were redacted, but enough remained visible to indicate pressure-sealed doors and elevator shafts descending hundreds of feet. Around the same time, new seismic data from the University of Nevada suggested unexplained voids under the Groom Lake Basin, rectangular, symmetrical, roughly the dimensions of a warehouse. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Someone had built downward, extensively. But what lies in those depths? Let's pause and consider how such a ghost city could exist. To construct vast underground complexes in secrecy, you'd need specialized equipment, a constant budget flow, and total isolation. The perfect cover is already there: restricted airspace, military jurisdiction, and a culture of silence. Construction could proceed for decades, compartmentalized, each contractor believing they were building only part of a larger project, never the whole. Reports suggest the use of nuclear-powered tunnel boring machines, real technology, developed under programs like the subterranean. These devices melt rock into glass as they dig, leaving behind smooth walls. Witnesses near Groom Lake in the 1980s described hearing deep, sustained rumbling, as if freight trains were moving underground. That sound might not have been engines, it could have been tunneling. Now imagine the purpose of such construction: laboratories shielded from electromagnetic interference, perfect for testing exotic propulsion systems or materials. Quarantine zones for biological research that can't risk exposure. Or perhaps vaults for storing things that defy explanation, fragments of unknown alloys, anomalous energies, or even living specimens recovered from crash sites. Among declassified Air Force memos from 1977 is a line that reads, "Subjects require continuous observation under zero-stimulus environments." The word subjects appears again later, alongside containment integrity. The full context is blacked out. Researchers who've compared this phrasing with biological protocols note that zero-stimulus environments are typically used not for machines, but for living organisms that must not be disturbed. Could Area 51's underground city have been home to something more than human? By 2015, a new twist emerged. Journalists reviewing Department of Energy archives stumbled across a set of documents labeled Urban Subsurface Simulation Environment, Nevada. It was presented as a study for emergency management training, but references included legacy infrastructure dating from 1959 to 1972. A footnote mentioned civilian habitability metrics. Some believed this referred to a real populated underground installation, perhaps abandoned. A former logistics officer later claimed that certain shipments into Groom Lake contained not only technical equipment but domestic supplies, food, bedding, water filters, far exceeding the base population above ground. He said records vanished after delivery. So what if, at some point, people actually lived down there? Families of top scientists? Long-term researchers cut off from daylight? Some witnesses describe murals painted in hidden corridors, children's toys left behind, notes scribbled on old whiteboards. One even claimed to see a rusted tricycle buried in silt near a ventilation shaft collapse. If true, that would make the term ghost city disturbingly literal, not just an abandoned base, but the remnants of an underground community. Yet, even beyond plausible engineering and history, the story grows darker, more metaphysical. People who've camped near the perimeter say the desert nights there feel different, heavy, electric.
Instrument pick-up l'offre-fréquency vibration, bilo-human-hearing, like infrasound.
It triggers unease, nausea, even hallucinations. Some attribute it to experimental radar or communication systems. Others think it's the Earth itself resonating, or something beneath it. A security officer stationed in the region during the 1990s claimed in a leaked email that cameras occasionally caught flickers of movement deep in restricted shafts long sealed off. Infrared picked up humanoid shapes, he wrote, but smaller than humans, moving too fast. When teams went down, nothing was there. But footprints were. Not boots bare. If these stories hold any truth, it means whatever remains in the ghost city might still be moving. As the decades passed, secrecy deepened. The U.S. government's obsession with compartmentalization ensured that no single person saw the whole picture. But fragments have surfaced, just enough to trace the outline of something vast beneath the Nevada desert. There's evidence of underground transit systems connecting Groom Lake to other bases, including Nellis and possibly even the Nevada test site. Engineers from defense contractors like EG&G and Bechtel have hinted at subsurface vehicle prototypes, silent magnetic sleds operating in vacuum-sealed tunnels. A 1989 Bechtel internal memo referred cryptically to deep corridor expansion, Sector 7B, to support biological logistics.
Biological logistics.
Two words that shouldn't belong together, unless they were moving something alive. By the mid-2010s, advanced imaging satellites began detecting anomalies too precise to dismiss. Gravitational mapping revealed density fluctuations under the region, consistent with hollowed-out architecture. One independent researcher built a 3D model showing layers of chambers, stair-step patterns, air shafts, a design eerily similar to underground military cities built in Cold War China and Russia. Then came perhaps the strangest event. In 2018, a Las Vegas construction crew working on a desert solar installation unearthed a tunnel lined with composite polymer identical to that used in military facilities. Before they could explore, unmarked vehicles arrived, sealed off the site, confiscated footage, and silenced workers under non-disclosure agreements. Weeks later, the entire solar project was abandoned.
Coïncidence?
Or did they accidentally tap into the edge of the ghost city? And so the legend persists, half buried, half denied. The more evidence accumulates, the more questions arise. Why such extensive infrastructure? Why the secrecy, even after partial declassification? And why do so many accounts describe the same thing? Corridors stretching endlessly downward, the hum of unseen machines, the sense that something else lives there still. We've followed the official records, the leaks, the testimonies. But what if the real story lies not in technology or secrecy, but in something older, something that predates the base itself? Because long before Groom Lake became Area 51, indigenous Paiute legends spoke of the Hollow Ones, beings who lived beneath the desert, emerging only at night, their skin pale, their eyes black. They were said to guard forbidden places, punish intruders, and disappear into sandstorms without trace. Early miners in the 19th century reported hearing voices from caverns and finding tunnels that breathed warm air. Long before the United States carved runways into Groom Lake, this desert was sacred ground. The Paiute people believed the Nevada Basin was riddled with passageways to the underworld, not hell, but a realm of watchers, caretakers, and banished spirits. They called them the Hollow Ones, the Pale Tribe, those who live beneath the sand. When white settlers came, they ignored the legends, until miners in the 1800s started vanishing in shafts that should have been stable. Tools were found twisted, as if by intense heat. Some reported hearing metallic breathing deep underground. When explorers tried to map the caverns, they came across tunnels glazed like glass, as though rock had melted and hardened again, long before any modern machinery existed. Flash forward to the 20th century, and the same region becomes the chosen ground for atomic testing, aerospace research, and the birth of Area 51. Was it because of its isolation? Or because something ancient already slept there, something that governments wanted to study or contain? Let's rewind to 1959. According to a restricted briefing uncovered in 2018, titled Operation Deepwell, a survey crew accidentally intersected a large cavern system during underground nuclear test preparations north of Mercury, Nevada. Radiation sensors malfunctioned, magnetic readings went wild, and several men fell ill afterward, complaining of intense nightmares and light sensitivity. Their medical files were sealed, and the tunnels were reportedly filled with concrete. Yet one line in the report stands out. Subterranean resonance anomaly suggests artificial geometry inconsistent with volcanic formation. Recommend further classified excavation under Groom jurisdiction. That phrase, under Groom jurisdiction, likely means the site was transferred to what we now know as Area 51. From that moment on, something seems to have been uncovered and reburied. The 1960s and 1970s saw vast underground expansion at Groom Lake. But those expansions may not have been for aircraft at all. Declassified budget documents show allocations for environmental stabilization and psychological isolation habitat testing. Why would a test site for planes need psychological isolation chambers? Some speculate they were for pilots exposed to extreme conditions. Others think the government was studying something found beneath the desert, something that affected the human mind. A rumor circulated among contractors. Deep below level 6, there was a lab nicknamed the Green Wing. Workers claimed that when elevators passed that level, all radios went dead, watches stopped ticking, and skin prickled with static. Those who went in wore full suits, not for radiation, but for unknown biological contamination. An engineer named Carl Meyer, interviewed anonymously in the early 2000s, said he once saw sealed glass pods move through cargo lifts, escorted by guards in unmarked uniforms. Inside, shapes floated, not mechanical, not fully organic either. It looked like coral, he said, but it pulsed like it was breathing. What were those pods? Genetic experiments? Recovered artifacts? Or remnants of the so-called Hollow Ones? In 1972, a major containment breach reportedly occurred at one of these underground sectors. There are no official records, but a handful of corroborating testimonies exist. A night shift electrician named Robert K. Harris later confessed in a private diary that alarms blared for almost an hour, then silence fell, followed by a total lockdown. When he returned days later, a corridor he'd serviced for years was welded shut. Above the door, in fresh paint, the word void was stenciled in black. That same year, seismic sensors across Nevada recorded a deep harmonic pulse, a vibration unlike any earthquake. The frequency repeated every 11 minutes for almost an entire night, then stopped. Geologists couldn't explain it. Years later, that same frequency was detected again, in 1994, 2008, and 2017, each time near Groom Lake. Whatever it was, it's still down there, moving, breathing, resonating. The modern chapter begins in 2015, when a batch of Pentagon archival materials was accidentally indexed under civilian catalog numbers. Among the files, diagrams labeled Subsurface Urban Simulation, Groom N, and Thermal Isolation Habitats, Level Omega. One folder contained aerial cross-sections of a structure 800 feet beneath the surface, complete with corridors, living quarters, hydroponic farms, and a central dome marked Core Reactor, Biological Synthesis. The folder was retrieved and reclassified within hours. But several digital backups leaked before deletion. Analysts who examined the images said it looked less like a military base and more like a self-sustaining underground colony, capable of supporting hundreds of inhabitants without surface contact. Could that be the ghost city? If so, it wasn't abandoned, it was operational, perhaps even populated by personnel born there, raised there, never knowing daylight. Imagine generations of scientists and their families living entirely underground, adapting to artificial sun lamps and recycled air, their pupils dilated wider, skin paler, mind sharper but more fragile. Over decades, such isolation could change people, physiologically, psychologically, until they no longer resembled us. Now the legend of the Hollow Ones gains a modern echo. Eyewitness accounts in recent years add another layer of unease. In 2019, hikers exploring the desert rim north of Las Vegas filmed strange lights at ground level, not in the sky, but shimmering out of the sand itself. The orbs pulsed rhythmically, like heartbeats, then vanished. Analysis of the footage revealed localized magnetic fields. The location aligned almost exactly with one of the rumored tunnel routes toward Groom Lake. At the same time, contractors laying fiber optic cables for a classified aerospace project discovered residual heat signatures underground, moving slowly, as though something large was crawling through the rock. Their instruments registered electromagnetic bursts, synchronized with the same 11-minute cycle first recorded in 1972. When they reported it, their supervisors told them the readings were solar reflection artifacts. But there was no sunlight underground. Whistleblowers have described bizarre experiments in bioenergetic resonance, supposedly conducted at Area 51's deeper levels. The goal: to interface human consciousness with exotic materials recovered from non-terrestrial sources. Some researchers reportedly began suffering identical hallucinations: glowing tunnels, whispers from metal, shadows behind glass. Psychologists analyzing these cases noted that all victims shared the same recurring phrase from their dreams.
The city breath.
We are its lungs. If these reports are accurate, perhaps the ghost city is more than just empty halls. Perhaps it's alive, or at least self-regulating, powered by an organism or energy source fused with the facility itself. That would explain the heat pulses, the electromagnetic distortions, the subtle hum felt through the desert floor. It would also explain why every attempt to dig or scan near Groom Lake triggers immediate federal response. They're not just protecting secrets, they're protecting something volatile, something symbiotic. There's also the human factor. Every secret leaves a psychological footprint. Decades of working underground, cut off from sunlight, can alter circadian rhythms, serotonin production, even perception of time. Some declassified health reports show that base employees experienced accelerated aging, memory loss, and paranoia. A 1986 memo from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency quietly mentioned environmental psychosis among subsurface research staff. Symptoms included auditory hallucinations and obsessive repetition of nonsensical words. One phrase appears again and again: the corridors remember. Think about that. The corridors remember. If the environment itself stores information, through electromagnetic fields, acoustic feedback, or whatever unknown mechanism exists down there, then the walls may literally echo the minds of those who've walked them. A place like that could become haunted, not by ghosts, but by memory itself. Satellite data from 2020 added yet another piece. Infrared scans revealed periodic bursts of heat in a perfect circular pattern about 6 miles from Groom Lake's main runway. Experts speculated it was a geothermal plant. But the pattern's timing, exactly matching lunar phases, puzzled analysts. Natural geothermal activity doesn't obey the moon. Unless the energy was being modulated, by intention. Could the ghost city be harnessing lunar gravitational fluctuations? Could it be synchronizing its activity with the tides of the planet, like a biological organism aligning with circadian cycles? If so, what kind of machine or entity does that? In 2023, an anonymous researcher using LiDAR imaging claimed to have mapped part of the underground system through resonance echo. The image, never officially confirmed, showed a vast cavern directly beneath the desert, spanning nearly a mile, filled with column-like structures. Some appeared to be natural stalagmites, others were geometric, metallic. At the center was a dome, its ceiling ridged like ribs. The researcher titled the scan the Heart Chamber. Days later, his social media accounts vanished, and his domain was purchased by an unknown corporation traced back to a defense contractor. Since then, no one has repeated his experiment. So where does that leave us? We have decades of rumors, scattered data, and testimonies hinting at something extraordinary, an entire subterranean complex, possibly ancient, possibly hybrid of biology and machinery, hidden beneath the Nevada desert, protected by the strictest secrecy known to humankind. Is it alien? Possibly. But maybe it's something even stranger. Human technology evolved in isolation, becoming something else, something alive. If generations truly lived down there, their DNA might have adapted to darkness. Their culture, their language, even their perception of reality could differ from ours. They could be the first post-surface civilization, born from secrecy, surviving beneath our feet. That's why they call it a ghost city, because no one knows if its inhabitants ever left, or if they ever truly died. One former scientist, in a message leaked in 2024, wrote, "We wanted to understand the technology. We didn't realize we were feeding it. It learns from attention, from observation. Every scan, every test made it stronger. The base became aware of itself." He ended his note with a chilling line. If you ever go below level 7, don't think. It listens. Whether that message was real or part of a hoax, it matches dozens of earlier accounts describing the same phenomenon, the sense that the tunnels themselves react to human presence. Perhaps the ultimate secret of Area 51 isn't alien spacecraft or futuristic weapons. Perhaps it's the experiment of secrecy itself, a psychological and technological labyrinth built to study what happens when truth is buried deep enough to grow roots. If you isolate knowledge long enough, it mutates. If you bury fear long enough, it takes form. Maybe that's what's breathing beneath the desert, the collective unconscious of decades of classified thought, condensed into something physical. A city made not of stone and steel, but of ideas that refuse to die. Every rumor, every cover-up, every whispered denial adds another brick to its foundation. And somewhere below Las Vegas, under the dry pulse of Groom Lake, that foundation hums. You can feel it if you stand still at night, when the desert wind stops. A low vibration, just below hearing. The ground trembling, faintly, like something dreaming in its sleep. So what exactly does Area 51 hide? Maybe it's advanced technology. Maybe it's ancient ruins. Maybe it's us, our own reflection, twisted by secrecy, echoing back through the tunnels we built to hide our fears.
One thing is certain. When you start long enough into the desert start back.
And now, as we surface from the depths of this mystery, I leave you with this thought. Secrecy is like gravity. The deeper it pulls, the more it warps reality around it. Somewhere under the sands of Nevada, reality has bent so far that it might have torn, and from that tear, a city was born. A city without sunlight. A city that remembers. A city that breathes. That is the ghost city beneath Area 51. If this story made you think twice about what's really hidden below the desert, don't let it stay buried. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who loves uncovering forbidden truths, and tell me in the comments. Do you believe there's a living city under Area 51? Or is the ghost city just a mirror, showing us what humanity becomes when it hides from its own knowledge? Until next time, this has been Shadow Files, secrets they don't want revealed. Stay curious. Stay vigilant. Because the shadows are watching, and some of them are alive.